our webinar. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for being here today. Huge appreciation, of course. I've got Paul Netscher with us. Paul will share his slide and will introduce himself as well. But it's a 2-hour CPD, and there's lots to talk, lots of case study. Very important for your RICS CPD, whether you're a student, a member, or also a chartered surveyor, or whether you are an engineer or an architect or any other professional. To me, this is the important topic for not just for our career, but for our profession as well. So Paul, thank you very much indeed for being here. As always, it's an honor. I just want to show you quickly before we kick start. It just amazed me. This is my 82nd webinar number 82, and Paul has done 3 of them. I'm just going to share the screen with you, just making sure we've got that sorted out. Yeah, and you see the screen there. That's the, I don't know if you can see that. Let me just making sure you've got the screen. Can you see the world map there, Paul?
Yes, I can see it.
So guys, if you can see, Paul is just there, Perth. I mean, we were just talking about Paul can wave at us, and that's our little island. And it's just amazing how cross borders can do, you know, magic in terms of the webinars and Zoom. To me, this extraordinary. It's mind-blowing stuff from one continent to the other, and we've got Paul there with seamless internet connection. So as I said, thank you everyone, and I just wanted to share that with you. Of course, we've got lots to share. So thank you very much indeed, and we will obviously. Paul, if you can share your slides, and then we can kick off from there. There'll be plenty. Please put your question and any answers or statement you've got through the Q&A tab, and we'll get Paul. Paul wanted to talk for 1 hour non-stop, but we'll try to stop him at half an hour just to get some question out as well. But very, very important topic for all professional today, and of course, making sure we've got the right mindset going forward in terms of ethical behavior. So Paul, we're just going to share the slide now. Yeah, so Anishta talked about unethical behavior being accepting bribe and encouraging corruption. Well spot on there, Anishta. So Paul, if you can go full slide. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. The slide is there, and please proceed. Thank you very much indeed.
Anil, you've got the correct slide view there, is it?
Yes, I've got the correct slide, and everybody, if you can see Paul's slide in full, and ourselves, can you just put your hands up? Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, all good to go, Paul. And once again, thanks a million for giving back. 228 of you registered today, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Anil, and welcome everybody, and thanks for being here and giving up your Saturday. It's only my pleasure to be with you because you know, I've had 30 great years of construction. I did well out of construction, and I really, like Anil, love sharing my knowledge. I want to make construction a better place. I want to make every construction project a success. So just a little bit about me, just to start off. So I've been 30 years in construction, more than 120 projects, and I done a wide variety of projects, from building a little bit of roads. I don't regard myself as a roads expert, but lots of concrete projects and different infrastructure projects for different clients, corporate, oil and gas, mining, government, contracts. So I've really been fortunate in the amount of experience that I've gained, the number of projects I've worked on, and the different people I've worked with in my team, and of course people that I've worked with from the client side. So huge experience, and I really love sharing that with all of you. So as part of my sharing, if you haven't heard of me before, I've written several books. So there's Successful Construction Project Management, which is done there for contractors. That was my first book. And there's another book, which is Construction Management from Project Concept to Completion, which is more for the client side. I've also written a book on claims, which I know Anil's read, and even down for supervisors and foremen. So try to cover everybody in the construction industry. Yeah, just to add that most of my experience, or all my experience, really is on the contractor side rather than from the client side. So those are just the books that I've written. They're all available from Amazon in paper or Kindle or ebook, and also from other online bookstores. So I know there in South Africa you can get them from Loot or Take a Lot and other online bookstores, or even ordering them from your local high street store. So that's just about me. So let's get on with the topic, a very important topic: ethics in construction. So unfortunately, many businesses carry out unethical practices. And I'm not just talking in the construction industry, I'm talking about all businesses. But contractors and the construction industry are often viewed as being unethical. And regrettably, there are many contractors who are unethical. But equally, there are also clients who engage in unethical practices and other construction professionals that do not act very professionally. But of course, not all contractors are unethical, and nor all clients are unethical. So in this presentation, I discuss why good ethics are important to you and your company. I also discuss what are unethical behaviors, and finally, what should not be considered as unethical. So as Anil said, jam-packed session, a lot to get through. So I hope I don't bore you all with all the information we're going to cover. I hope you all find it interesting and useful. So what is ethics? I think we have to dive into that before we can go further. So this institution, Makula Center for Applied Ethics, they said some years ago, the sociologists asked business people, what does ethics mean to you? So that's an important question. What does ethics mean to you? So amongst the replies that this sociologist got back were, ethics has to do with what my feelings tell me is right or wrong. Another reply was, ethics has to do with my religious beliefs. A third reply, being ethical is doing what the law requires. Another, ethics consists of the standards of behavior our society accepts. And of course, there were some who said, I don't know what the word means. So what is ethics? Now, if we look at those, someone said it's the feelings tell me is right or wrong. But now what are your feelings? Maybe your feelings are to make as much money as possible. Maybe your feelings are to look after your family first and foremost. And those are probably all good feelings. But does that mean that you must make money at the expense of others? So being ethical is not necessarily a matter of following one's feelings, because if you think about people all have different feelings. What do people aspire to do? We all aspire to do things differently. So a person following his or her feelings may recoil from doing what is right. In fact, feelings frequently deviate from what is ethical. So you might pass a pretty girl down the street and your feelings might be, you know, I really fancy her, but meanwhile you are married. So clearly to follow your feelings and desires and chase after the pretty girl is not necessarily ethically right if you're married. So and vice versa. So nor should we identify ethics with religion, because I'm sure if we look at most religions, there have been some terrible things done in the name of a religion. And even today we have political leaders who go to worship at the centers of worship wherever they are, and they whatever practicing whatever religion it is, and yet they can then the next day be lying, stealing, corruption, whatever. So being religious is not necessarily about being ethical. And being ethical is also not the same as following the law. After all, there've been discriminatory laws in many countries. If we look back at South Africa with apartheid law, that was law. Does that mean it was ethical to follow the law and discriminate? Well, obviously not. And of course, some people bend this even further and say, well, if the law hasn't caught me out, well, then I'm being ethical. So following the law, and laws are not always ethical. And finally, being ethical is not the same as doing whatever society accepts, because in some countries corruption is accepted or more acceptable. Does that mean that it's right? No, of course it doesn't mean that it's right. And if you go back to Nazi Germany, where it was seen as the done thing to discriminate against the Jews, that was the general acceptance, but that doesn't mean that it was right. So obviously, as we said, some of those answers, they're half, maybe a quarter right, but they're not really answering what ethics is. So let's look at the definition of ethics, and the same institute that put out that what we've just seen on the previous slides, they said ethics is based on well-founded standards of right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, benefits to society. So that's important, benefits to society. Fairness, that's an important word, or specific virtues. Another definition of ethics that comes up, the word ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which is character. What is your character? And from the Latin word mores, or custom. So together they combine to define how individuals choose to interact with one another. So we're getting down to what ethics is. It's how we choose to interact with one another. So in philosophy, ethics defines what is good for the individual and for society, and establishes the nature of duties that people owe themselves and one another. So that's ethics in a bit of a nutshell there. Though law often embodies ethical principles, law and ethics are far from coextensive, as we discussed in the previous slide. So many acts that would be widely condemned as unethical are not prohibited by law. So in general, there's no laws in countries that prohibit you from lying, from putting one-sided contracts before contractors, and it's often very difficult, and I'm sure both contractors and clients from the client side, our participants here have found that laws often don't cover certain behaviors. You get into trouble on a contract and you go and look at your contract document, and you go and look at your laws in the country, and you often come up against a brick wall, as it were, and there's nothing you can do to against the contractor or against the client. So laws are often there's certain ethical principles in most lawful laws in most countries, but law doesn't cover everything. So we just do a quick quiz, so check that none of you are sleeping there. So, so does construction have an unfair reputation for poor ethics? So okay. Our first question to you out there, are you ethical? Do you think that you personally are ethical?
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. I've got a first question, which is quite a tricky one. Just making sure, out of a scale of 1 to 10, how ethical are you? 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. It's a tricky one, but be honest, and let's see what you rate yourself, and be good to see that one.
We can't. We don't know who's answering what, so we can't come back to you if you mark yourself down as
Yeah,
one. So
exactly, and we can't see anybody as well. We don't have names or anything, so it's all anonymous. Be good to see how, out of scale of 1 to 10, how ethical are you? 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. So we'll give you about 30 seconds before we really get to close the. And it's great to have a lot of participants today as well. Great to see all of you for this amazing webinar. So I'm just going to end the poll now and share the results. So Paul, here we go. The results are out. We've got only the 2% is being the lowest in ethical. We've got a whopping 62% between 7 and 9 being as ethical as it can be, and we've got 21% being like top-notch ethical professional, but we've got about a few percentage around 1 to 5. What's your thought on that, Paul?
Well, it's always good to see that people think they're ethical, and we would like every one of our participants to be 100% ethical all the time. It'll be interesting to see the poll at the end of my presentation. But yeah, I mean, it's always good to know that you're dealing with ethical people, because that's who you want to do business with.
Okay, so there was the next question which linked to your slide is a yes or no, because I'm just going to WhatsApp, a few colleagues can't really answer everything. But yeah, Ning from Singapore say it's not an easy question to answer, especially for someone coming from a construction sector. What's your thought on that, Paul?
I think we're going to cover a little bit of that in this first section. So, well, oh no, sorry, in the second section, which is the benefits of being ethical. So yeah, we will cover that. Okay, so now that the answer is a bit more clearer, I'm going to share the result with you. Are you ethical as per the slide 8 there? 100% say yes, and we would expect that as well. So thank you very much indeed, Paul. Take it away. We've got some more questions along the way. I think there's one more poll survey. Just one sec. Let me just check. Sorry. So there was the second question. Do you think that in general contractors are ethical?
Absolutely. I'm just going to launch that now. And do you think that in general contractors are ethical? Now, this is a good one because the moment a contractor sent a claim for a notification for an extension of time, Paul, already there, the consultant and client are not happy. Why is that?
Well, Anil, you're jumping forward to us, and that's why I cover what are not unethical behaviors, because there's certain things that, and this is just, as I say, we cover the topic later. Yeah. So
okay, perfect.
People think because a contractor made lots of money on a contract, that's unethical. Well, is it really, you know? So.
All right, perfect. I'm going to stop sharing. What do you think the percentage would be based on your experience, Paul? Do you think that in general contractors are ethical? What the percentage would be based? What do you think? Have a guess.
Well, I guess it might depend on country to country. It does depend on the companies as well, because ethics is also comes with leadership, and we cover some of that a little bit later. But it'd be interesting to see to know, and we can't with this poll, whether all contractors think they're ethical, and from the client side, whether the clients think the contractors, because I'm sure the opinions will be skewed, because it's always when you're looking at the other side of the fence, you're going to blame the other side.
Okay, so the results are out. 31% say yes, we think that general contractors are ethical, and 69% say no. So here we go, something we can talk about later. And then we've got, how much are the results? Sorry. So do you think that in general contractors are ethical? 31% say yes, and a staggering amount of 79% say no. So Paul, let me just now Did you see the
I'm
result?
from the contractor side, so I say that the participants must all be biased. They must all come from the client side.
Okay, so, and then I've got one more, which is to do with your next question there. And I'm going to launch the poll now. Do you think that in general, the client and the team is ethical? Now, that's a good one. So let's see if you can vote on that one. Let me just relaunch poll. Continue. Right, I think you can see it now. So do you think that in general, the client and the team is ethical? That's a good one. We'll see what the contractor's colleague says now, which we kind of turn the question around. Do you think that in general, the client and the team is, because what happens sometimes is there's design mistake, there's design issues, and they try to offload it on contractors for some time.
Yeah, and that's what we cover a little bit later. So
yeah. All right, perfect. So please keep voting. I'll give you 20 seconds and then we're just going to stop now. Let's see what you guys are saying now. So I'm going to show the result. And Paul, that's an interesting one. 49% say yes and a 51% say no. So we could see there's a bit of a battle between the consultant and the contractors watching us right now. Paul, take it away and thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Anil. Thanks for answering those questions. Right, so just moving forward. So a study by PricewaterhouseCoopers, public contracts in 8 countries in the European Union in 2010. I know this is a little bit going back nearly 12 years, but I'm sure you'll find much similar statistics now, identified that the direct public loss encountered due to corruption in public contracts accounted for 18% of the overall project budgets concerned, of which 13% can be attributed directly to corruption, that's fraud and whatever, and this is now introducing another theme, and 5% due to mismanagement. So mismanagement, to many degree, is also poor ethics. So imagine that for every dollar spent, 18 cents disappeared. So $1 million project, a project that should have costed $1 million is in effect costing an average $200,000 more. That's the 18%, 13% attributed to corruption, 130,000 of $1 million contract, and 5%, 50,000 due to mismanagement. So who is paying for that? Is it just the client that's paying for it? Well, it's really everybody, because some of that corruption impacts the contractor. The contractor's losing out. The contract's not as efficient if he's mismanaging the project. There's taxpayers. There's users of that facility. If the facility, if the apartment that's being built is going to cost 18% more, well, the end buyer is going to pay more. The end user of that factory, the facilities, are going to pay more. So actually, it's costing all of us. It's not just the client, and I know many of us think, oh, well, it's just the client, but everybody's losing out in this corruption. So in the US, as they say, the FBI places public corruption as one of their #1 priorities, even though the US is considered to be the 18th least corrupt country in the world. Again, as I say, this is a little bit old. So unfortunately, corrupt practices occur throughout the various construction project phases and can be perpetrated by any of the project stakeholders. And I think that's an important part. It's any of the project stakeholders. And this corruption is due to the direct and deliberate corrupt practices. So that's bribes, that's stealing, as well as mismanagement and incompetence. So really, people mismanaging things, they're being incompetent, they're not doing the job they're being paid for, is a form of corruption in some ways. So mismanagement of construction projects occurs far too frequently. And I'm sure we can all relate stories of theft, corruption, fraud and mismanagement that occurred on a construction project. So whether you're a project owner, an investor, project manager, or a contractor, it pays to be vigilant to avoid corruption and unethical practices on your project. So not only do unethical practices result in someone realizing less value, remember that client is paying $1.2 million in those EU countries to get a project actually worth $1 million. So someone is getting less value than what they paid for. So it's like you go to a fast food outlet and you go and pay a few dollars to get your hamburger, and actually when they serve it to you, there's only 80% of the burger there because someone's stolen the other 20% from it. Would you be happy with that? Well, obviously not. You paid for a full burger, you want a full burger. You paid for a full meal, you want a full meal, what you paid for. But of course, unethical practices also impact reputation and even results in fines and prison times, as we'll see. So what are unethical behaviors? I don't think we're going to open this to the audience, Anil, are we?
No, because it's going to be an open-ended, so I think we can proceed. And of course, I'll get the audience to please put your comment on the Q&A. What are unethical behaviors? Some of you have already added, so we can have a chat later. Please proceed, Paul. Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm just going to go through some of these examples. They're all copied from newspapers and media. I'm not going to go into detail of any of them, and I'm going to try and gloss over them to not to spend too much time on them. So this is most of these examples are from America, from the United States. So this company pretended to be a service disabled veteran-owned small business. So in America, service disabled veteran, it's someone served in their army, in their defense force, they got wounded, injured, and now they're disabled. And I'm sure we've all seen pictures of people coming back from the war. So this is a kind of fronting, and I know that also happens in countries also all around the world. And yeah, so this company pretended to be owned by someone who's ex-soldier who's been wounded, but meanwhile they just employed this person, paid him a normal salary, and they weren't actually a director on this company. So these owners who perpetrated this fraud, they could face a maximum penalty of up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. So basically, they got contracts, $250 million worth of contracts, government contracts, that should have gone to legitimate service disabled veteran-owned businesses. So they fraudulently put forward that they were owned by someone who'd suffered a disability while serving their country. So this is one fraud. This is another example. Two men pleaded guilty to fraudulent scheme to avoid payroll taxes. This is again in America. And so they're going to be asked to pay back the $1.4 million. Plus, there's been another $5.8 million the government wants back as restitution for the tax fraud, and they could face 20 years in prison. So basically, they rented out workers' compensation certificates to subcontractor crews. Wow. So another form of fraud. This Pennsylvania contractor charged with stealing $20 million from its workers. So this company, Hallbaker, claimed to provide above average employee benefits, when in actuality the company was stealing its workers' retirement, health, and welfare money. So stealing from people who worked hard to earn for the company and weren't paid all their entitlements. So yeah, Another one here, this New York firm, they were skimming 1.2 million from public projects. So the officials have recovered 1.8 million from a subcontractor accused of falsifying the inflating bills. So some contractors may do that. They inflate the bills, add extra hours on, add extra rates, add in extra cubic meters of concrete as part of their punishment for 5 years. So we debarred from submitting bids, prices, or being awarded any public work in the state of New York for 5 years. So that's quite a serious punishment, one would think. So another example here, this private, hopefully that you can still see me. There was just a bit of internet interruption.
It's all good. We can see you. No problem.
The owner of this private building inspection company and the top building inspector for the city of New Orleans are facing arrest Thursday for fabricating safety inspections for a local contractor. So this government safety inspector, he was bribed by the contractors to falsify the safety inspections on the building site. So now he's facing arrest, and this engineering firm, they were arrested for alleged theft of more than $2 million. So these 3 former executives of this engineering firm have been arrested after allegedly stealing approximately $2 million from clients across Pennsylvania. So the 3 defendants have been charged with theft by deception, theft by receiving stolen property, deceptive business practices, corrupt organizations, and conspiracy. So what did they do? They repeatedly overbilled clients for time spent on the job. So that overbilled the hours, they billed more hours than were there. So what did the prosecutor say? So let's be clear about what this means. When you bill for time that you didn't work, you are stealing. So I think that's a very clear statement. When you bill for things that you didn't do, you are stealing. So they've been charged with theft by deception, theft by receiving stolen property. So they were paid money they were not due. Another fraud charge, again, this is America, 1 million. They were paid 1 million to settle fraud allegations that the company violated the False Claims Act by misrepresenting themselves as a smaller, disadvantaged business. So this is similar to the first example, which was the veteran disabled. So here they said a smaller, disadvantaged business. So there was some fronting going on. They pretended to be a company that they were not, and legitimate businesses, legitimate disadvantaged businesses, whether that's woman-owned, whether that's minority-owned, whether it's lost out on contracts because this business misrepresented themselves. So this is an interesting one. So this lawsuit alleges shoddy construction. This is Austin, this is in Texas, in the United States. So a lawsuit alleges there are substantial construction defects at this apartment building that threaten the health and safety of the tower's residents. So people spent millions of dollars, bought apartments into this building, and what do they find? If we look down there, the condos or the apartments, flats, had shoddy workmanship with uneven and angled floors, bowed-in walls, poorly cut baseboards, ill-fitting cabinets, uneven and splotchy paintwork. So someone has paid for an apartment, and this is the workmanship, this is the quality they get. Incredible. So the lawsuit seeks damages for claims, including fraud. So this is what some contractors don't understand, that delivering poor quality is fraud, because basically the client is paid for something, they expect to get a quality product, and they're not getting the product they paid for. So furthermore, the lawsuit, it's a violation of the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act. So it's deception, so it's deceit. So it also goes on, it's negligence and it's unjust enrichment and conspiracy to commit fraud. So poor quality, we don't think necessarily that poor quality is unethical, but you know, as we can see from this example, it's deceptive trade, it's negligence, it's unjust enrichment. So this
So
builder,
Paul,
this is
Paul, just a quick one, Paul. In the slide number 20, that's a good one because, of course, we are all in construction, and of course, not just those who are watching as professional construction, but also layman colleague watching us from different industry. The slide number 20 is a good one, and it's quite a thought-provoking because you know you pay good money, and we know many local builders mess up our houses and home and get away from it. So technically, what you said there is unethical, is fraudulent.
Yes, absolutely, and you know, and that's why some people don't see that. And if we go right back to our very beginning, what does following your feelings, does that mean it's right or ethical? So
yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So yes, this is similar to what you were saying now, Anil. So this builder in England, he was jail. He was pleaded guilty to 2 counts of participating in a fraudulent business. So so there was prosecution related to 8 separate properties. And just at the bottom, the judge in sentencing him said, you knew the money that you were taking could not provide the goods you said it would. So you knew you were taking money and you knew you weren't going to deliver this poor person, this old lady's house that was left half completed. Here's also in England, this contractor was jailed for this dumping rubbish in a quarry site that he shouldn't, building waste into a quarry site he shouldn't have done, so he was fined. This contractor gets a jail time for a trench fatality. He was charged with 2 counts of reckless endangerment and 1 count of 3rd-degree assault. So he's been charged with assault. Someone died on his construction project. So he's been charged with assault and 1 count of so they employed this person to install drywall and to do carpentry work, and then used them to lay a water pipe in the trench. Obviously something he wasn't employed to do and wasn't trained on the dangers of working in a trench. So the trench had collapsed the day before this person got killed, but this contractor did nothing about it and went on regardless. So, so basically willfully failed to use a required trench protective system. So willfully failed. So, and this is a construction company. This is from the contractor side. They looking for $7 million from their client, $2 million from the original work they did. So now they owe retention to 30 subcontractors. They're still waiting for their $2 million. And in addition to that, they haven't been paid for their change orders or their variation claims that they lodged of $5 million. So yeah. This contract, this is a US military contractor, and for 30 years, this contractor produced steel castings for submarines that failed laboratory tests and below the standards required by the US Navy. So this lady, Thomas, 67, for 30 years, she's falsified results for more than 240 batches of steel. So this is probably an employee of the company. She's now 67. She's probably retired, maybe looking out to spend time with her grandchildren. And she could be now spending time in jail because for 30 years, she falsified these test results for the steel. And in addition, this company paid the Navy more than $10 million for all these steel that was sold that didn't meet specification. This developer was jailed for illegally demolishing this Irish pub in Melbourne. So it was a heritage listed building, and sometimes we see developers do that. Well, it's against the law to demolish a heritage buildings, but what the hell, we go ahead, demolish the building because they're not going to make us rebuild it. So what did the state of Victoria and Australia do? They said, no, you're not going to build anything on this land, you must convert it to a public park. So we can't make you rebuild a demolished building. It's now going to be public land. So they said, up yours, we're not going to do that. So they got fined extra money for it. So this county inspection waived at least $3 million of inspection fees. So he worked for the government, worked for the county board. So who lost the money? It's basically the taxpayers in the county, because instead of the developer who built this $220 million center paying the $3 million, all they did is they gave this person some tickets to basketball tickets and a free parking space.
And Paul, this is quite recent as well. This is quite recent. This is 3 weeks ago.
Probably, yeah, I can't remember. Yes. Yes. So a lot of these examples.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just going to skip over these two slides. They are very interesting slides, but they're almost a topic on themselves. So let's then go into summary. What are unethical behaviors? So what do they include? Well, not ensuring your project is safe during construction and once completed. Surely it's unethical if someone is killed because you haven't provided, you've put them into unsafe working conditions.
Absolutely.
Giving the client or future owners a poor quality project or one that is defective. Well, we saw from that slide, you're being paid to deliver a project with a certain quality and specification. If you don't meet that, you're actually stealing from the client. Falsifying test results and faking documents. Of course, that's unethical. Deliberately omitting items or supplying products that do not conform to specifications and standards. Paying bribes or providing incentives of any sort. Of course, that's unethical. Fraud, accepting bribes, fraud, unethical. Not paying employees their agreed wages and salaries at the agreed time. Someone's entered into an agreement with you to do the work at a specific wage. If you break that agreement or you don't pay them on time, it's unethical. Employing illegal migrants. So yeah, this is just a couple of slides. So on the left-hand side there, do you think that's unethical to have the painters working on that scaffolding? Does it even look safe? This happens to be, this is how the plumber joined these two pipes, and you can see, no wonder they were leaking, so we had to chop open the wall to find the leak there. So,
wow.
All too common, unfortunately. So accommodating workers in cramped, dirty accommodation, employing and promoting friends and relatives over others who are better qualified to do the work, not paying contractors, suppliers and subcontractors what's due to them and on time, fake qualifications and registrations, poor environmental practices. We saw that with dumping rubbish on vacant lots, instead of disposing of it correctly, dumping oil, paint down drains. Who's going to clean that up? Where is that oil paint going to disappear to? Theft of any sort, obviously that's unethical, that's fraud. Discrimination of any sort, and we didn't really just cover that, but if someone's capable of doing the job, why do you discriminate against that person? that's unethical to discriminate against somebody just because of their sex, their color of skin, or perhaps because you don't like them or their religion or whatever. And taking a cut from payments to contractors, subcontractors, suppliers, or workers. I think we cover an example later in this. Getting contractors or subcontractors to do work at no cost to you at your home. Who is paying for that? Ultimately, contractors rigging or fixing prices so that a particular contractor wins the project with an inflated price. So if there's 5 contractors bidding on it, they make an agreement that one of them is going to win and they take it in turns, or they add a loser's fee in that, so they add an extra 100,000 and share that between the 4 contractors who are not going to get it. So giving contractor orders to companies owned by friends or relatives when they're not the cheapest or their products do not meet specifications. Interesting one here, Neil, using one-sided contracts skewed to favor you or your company. Surely that is unethical when you draw up a contract knowing that the other party's always going to be on the losing end.
And Paul, on this one, I think we're trying to do more and increase awareness to see if we can make sure the contract is impartial to both parties, because many a time there are risks which are offloaded to the contractor, which he can't manage, right?
Yes, so placing excessive and unacceptable risks on a party that can't manage that risk. And we could probably have a whole webinar on that, unless you've already covered that, because it's another one of my favorite topics, because clients pass it down to the contractor. What does the contractor do? He passes it down to the subcontractor, and eventually the poor little subcontractor's got all the risks on top of him. And it's really a false economy, because at the end of the day, he can't manage the risks because he's not in a position to manage it. So you really want the party who can best manage the risks to take that risk. So nobody's watching the risk because you passed it all the way down to somebody who can't manage it. So the risk is more likely to happen. And then when it does happen, how much can that poor little subcontractor pay? You can bankrupt him, but it's probably not even a tenth or even a 1% of what the full value, the full shock and damage to the contract is, because everybody's just shoveled the risk down to some poor subcontractor down the way. As I say, a topic on its own, and I got a little bit sidetracked. But
this is definitely something we need to talk about in the future, Paul. Something we can work together, because I think ultimately, if we get the right contract, which is a two-sided one, impartial one, ultimately the client comes out as a winner and get a seamless project, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
So yeah, moving on. So more unethical practices, adjudicating prices. That's when you get quotes or prices, adjudicating it in such a way that gives your favored contractor or supplier an unfair advantage over other bidders. Clients awarding projects to contractors when the contractor's price is clearly too low. So another favorite topic of mine, and some clients want to say, why is that unethical? If he quoted for that price, but if he can't do it and he's made a mistake, why do you have to capitalize on it? And again, it's another whole webinar we could discuss why employ a contract, why it's dangerous to employ a contractor when the price is too low.
Absolutely.
Only going to lose at the end of the day. So just check with your contractor. You're sure, and yeah, maybe there's a legitimate reason these prices are so cheap, because he's got the equipment there, he knows how to do the project, he's working in the area and whatever. But just don't just go for the bargain price without checking what the bargain includes. So when you go shopping and you see something on sale, you're going to go and just check, why is it on sale? You know, is it because it's got holes in it? Is it because it's defective? So
absolutely.
What are you getting for your price? So not providing all contractors the same information to price the project. Some clients sometimes do that. Preparing the project scope, specifications or requirements to favor a particular preferred contractor, knowing that the other contractors will have difficulty. So putting in specifications, you need that specific kind of equipment. Well, does it actually matter? Isn't going to make a difference to the project at the end of the day. So I think we've seen that in some of the state contracts in South Africa, for instance, where they were, the contracts were put out that only certain contractors could quote for it.
Now, Paul, just a quick one. The first bullet point there, preparing the project scope and spec and requirement to favor a particular contractor. Now, this is new to me. I mean, does things like that happen?
Well, as I say, I've seen it in some of the contracts. I think it was with the rail contracts in South Africa. I think it was for some of the rolling stock. It was put out that we need specifically this particular engine, and I won't quote the country that it was supplied with, whereas you could use other engines to get the same power inputs, power outputs, and so those other contractors literally had to buy the rolling stock from the specific supplier.
Incredible.
When it actually didn't affect it. So,
all right, thank you, Paul.
Clients that bid shop, I'm sure we all know that, they tell their favorite contractor, well, your price is not the lowest, but if you come in at 2 million, then we'll give you the contract. So submitting bogus or overly inflated variation claims and change orders. So some contractors like to do that. Well, we're going to put in a claim for $10,000 and we know that the client's going to cut us in half and then we'll get 5,000. But why do that? It's put in an honest, fair price and then argue, got the facts to justify why you need $5,000. Don't go and ask for 10,000 and then just to bargain off with the client.
But Paul, just quickly on the submitting overinflated claims, or in your book, which I obviously love, the green one, the claim. I mean, how do we tackle this as an industry? Because I mean, all of us watching right now are all professional. In terms of the inflated, extra over costs that sometimes not relating to the project. I mean, what do we do? Create more awareness, create more workshops, and more collaboration?
Well, it comes down to ethics and honesty, and yes, we can have a workshop on change orders, but at the end of the day, as I say in my book, I submitted on nearly every one of my projects change orders or variation claims, and almost every one of them I've been paid what I asked for. So I didn't ask for more, but it develops the relationships with the client. If your first claim goes in and you ask for $10,000 and he says, I don't believe you, and you put all the papers down and you explain to him, there it is, I need $10,000, and he says, okay, I give up, I'm going to pay you $10,000 because I can't find any holes in it. Well, that establishes the relationship. So when you're putting in your third and your fifth claim, eventually the client's saying, okay, this guy is honest. And I'm not saying I've got everything, because sometimes there's a little bit of give and take, and you've got to look at the bigger picture. So, as a contractor, you also got to make sure the client takes a win occasionally. So you'll say, okay, it's not 10,000, but I know I can justify 10,000, but I could give $500 back from the claim, so I get paid $9,500. Or whatever. But I never had a claim cut in half because I'd manufactured evidence, or I just said, this is the claim, and the client, this is a bartering system. It's not a bartering system. It's, you've got to justify what you're claiming. You can't claim variations or change orders if you can't prove that's what it cost you.
Exactly, and you spell that out clearly in your little book, which again I will show that to the audience later, which to me is a must read. But I absolutely agree with you, Paul. But also, nobody come to work to do a bad job. So everybody wakes up in the morning, want to do a good job, want to do well. And this is where we need to do more collaboration and more awareness. Thank you very much indeed, Paul.
So yeah, this is a pet hate of mine, clients that don't respond to your variation claims or change orders, and they deliberately ignore the claims or refuse to pay the variation claims or change orders. And moving on, preparing the project scope, specifications or requirements to favor, oh, sorry, we've done that one. Sorry, the last point there, vexatious legal disputes raised by any of the parties. Some clients or some contractors, automatic response is get the lawyers involved, launch the law claim, the legal claim, and sometimes these are just vexatious claims.
Paul, just quick one, what's vexatious?
Well, really false legal things and just argumentative. So I'm just going to sue you for everything. I didn't like what you said. And we get that. There's a famous or infamous businessman here in Australia who probably is fighting about 50 law claims at any one time because he sues everybody.
Wow.
Because he's got the money to do it, you know, and often the hope is, you know, the big boy can just crush the small boy and small business because they don't have the money to fight these claims.
Absolutely.
So constructing projects to favor particular stakeholders while disadvantages others in the process. Now, this is particularly with politicians who divert public money to projects that their friends or family will build, or to projects that favor a particular electorate or region. Constructing projects which blight the neighborhood. We see some developers, I mean, some of the projects are really terrible. They're just there to make money and stuff people around there. Billing people for people not on the project. We covered that in one of the examples, charging hours in excess of what was worked. Designers producing inferior designs that have errors because they weren't done diligently and checked properly. Designers stipulating products that are supplied by a favored supplier when there may be other better or cheaper products. Blaming others for mistakes or failures you were responsible for. Those delegated to check quality, paperwork, invoices, not doing their work diligently. Deliberately underestimating project costs and preparing budgets which are too low so that the project will proceed. We see that particularly with politicians. And why does the project overrun the budget? Well, the budget was wrong in the first place. Why was the budget wrong? Well, they brought made the budget so low just to make the project go ahead. So
absolutely.
Ignoring expert opinion because it clashes with your own views. So in summary, poor ethics can be a deliberate act of committing fraud. So that's how many people see ethics, as a deliberate act of committing fraud, which includes not paying for services rendered, paying or accepting bribes, theft, falsifying documents. But it also can be deliberately taking advantage of another stakeholder. So whether that's the client, contractor, subcontractor. So done to benefit you or your company or others, and often being justified as being right. But the question to ask is right for who? So this includes discrimination. So that might not be necessarily put in the box of fraud, but it's taking advantage of another stakeholder. one-sided contractor supplying inferior products. But poor ethics can also be an act of negligence, which could be due to laziness and not carrying out your required duties, a lack of diligence in carrying out your duties, not acting to correct something which is wrong, turning a blind eye. Happens, unfortunately, a little bit too frequently on projects. We'll just ignore that unsafe act. We'll just ignore that poor quality. We'll just ignore someone doing something wrong. So that's really poor ethics. You know how that task should be carried out. You know what the required safety and quality is. Why do you turn a blind eye, turn your back and ignore that unsafe practice? And failing to apply or comply with specifications and legislation. So that's the specifications for the project. So it's poor ethics not to comply. So sorry, there's awful long list there, and I'm sure not going to remember all of those, but hopefully some of those have just opened your eyes out there to say, oh, really, is that poor ethics? I hadn't thought of poor quality or poor safety as being unethical, but really it is, because it's affecting what someone gets from the project. It's affecting someone's life, perhaps, with safety. So again, we come back to our first question we asked to say, are you ethical? And we're just repeating, maybe we've changed a few minds along there, Neil. Maybe someone said, well, maybe I'm not 100% ethical as I thought I was.
Absolutely. So we just, the question is there, are you ethical? And have you changed your mind from the start of the presentation? Of course, we've got 1 more hour to go. There's plenty to talk about. So yeah, please, if you can just I'll give you 30 seconds. If you've changed your mind on are you ethical, now that we've got a bit more information on what we've talked about. So we'll give you 30 seconds on that one. And it's, yeah, so Paul, thank you very much so far. It's been a really a big eye-opener when it comes to ethics, especially for all the students, practitioners, graduate, postgraduate, as well as chartered professional watching us today. So yeah, I'm just going to stop the poll now and just share the results. So we're just going to share the result now. So a whopping 93% says, yes, we are ethical. We've changed our mind from the start of the presentation. That's 93% yes, and we've got 7% no. So yeah, so thank you very much indeed, Paul, on that one. Paul, we're just gonna, if you don't mind, just take a few questions from the audience as we reach end of part 1. I've got a few questions which I'd love to, and you've got your book there as well, Essential Reading for Contractors. Please, again, if you can take a screenshot of that, everyone. It's a great book. I've gone through that. I've got a copy of it. I haven't read it fully, but it just gives you hints and tips on successful construction project management. Paul, I'm gonna, if you can just stop sharing your screen for 5 minutes, I'm gonna try to get some of the questions from the participant and just making sure we answer some of the questions. So guys, everyone, if you can just put your question in. We had a question earlier from Graham. Graham goes on to say, Paul, that maybe the contractor is ethical, but the project manager running the project may not be ethical. I think that's the problem. Have you faced something like that before?
Yes, I mean, obviously, yes, I've dealt with unethical clients. I've dealt with unethical project managers, particularly when the delegated project manager is possibly from the design team or the architect or the engineer, and then they don't want to admit that their mistake cost the client money or whatever. But as we'll see moving on, unfortunately, unethical behaviors, it's a vicious cycle and it causes more unethical behaviors. So.
Okay, thank you. We've got Siti Fatima. She said earlier, quite a very mind-boggling pair of questions where we were doing the survey for the contract and the consultant. She goes on to say quite a very mind-boggling pair of questions those last two questions had been, but I'm glad I've worked representing both as a health and safety professional in the construction industry. Thank you for that. Have you encountered any situation which was legal but unethical? I think we've talked about that. There's a question there which we've got from, in a company, most of the time, that's Abdul Hafiz from Nigeria, most of the time I observe we don't follow contract condition and professional ethic properly during project planning, execution stage, until the project run into a big mess. How can we ensure that this is mitigated? Just a few words on that, Paul.
Well, I think I cover that in that green book, is that unfortunately many contractors don't read their contract until the project is in trouble. Then it's, oh, let's pull it out the bottom drawer, let's dust it off and let's start reading. When you get to that stage, it's normally too late to be reading your contract. You've got to read your contract right in the beginning. And as I say in the book, when you've got a change order, a variation claim, it doesn't start when the event happens. If you don't have all the backup correspondence, if you don't have the right contract in place, you're going to battle to put in and win a change order or variation claim.
Yeah.
So it really starts before the project starts, into understanding. In fact, contractors all too often sign contracts that put them in the back foot before they even start. And why do you accept contracts? Why do you bid or price projects where the contract has got loopholes, or it's one-sided, or it puts excessive risks into you? Be sure you've read the contract when you price the project.
All right, thank you. We've got Ningli from Singapore. To ensure ethical behavior is being observed, certain guidelines must be laid out and conveyed for all to be aware of, which you just talked about, and certain guidelines ought to be adhered to. If the party deviates and blatantly carries out unethical action, certain action can be undertaken. So basically what you just said, you've summed that up there, Paul, nicely. We've got Hamdan, who goes on to say about unethical behavior, consultant not being fair and following contract properly just because consultant is engaged by the client. The biased approach toward contractor. Just a few words on that, Paul, where obviously sometimes the consultant made a mistake. I just talked to you about it, and they try to offload it on the contractor because they don't want to admit that, look, we made a mistake, client, and let's try to resolve it.
Well, I think one's got to follow the contractual procedures and put in your change order, and if it gets rejected, well, what is the next step in that that your contract allows you to go, and often it's a matter of and I explain it in the book. It's obviously, I prefer to resolve these things before I get the lawyers involved. So sometimes you even can go above the person to his boss or to the client and say, look, this is the issue or whatever. And maybe that project manager's not going to be happy with you, but you've got to be paid fairly at the end of the day. And if you've then got to escalate it and eventually go whatever the procedure might be, whether it's arbitration or go the legal route, well, that's what you've got to do. So
there's a question for you, and this is quite an interesting one from Prakash. Prakash says, fast track project often put designer, engineers, project managers, and contractors to test in order to save time and money. Isn't that an unethical process that undermines the very integrity of the word project?
Look, and we think we must just make this the last question for now. We'll come back to questions later. Okay. But unfortunately, there is undue pressure and fast track projects. And sometimes, is that really necessary? You know, I've had projects where it's in a hurry to start, and then you start and then you're standing, you know, whereas if you'd actually delayed the start to get the design done properly, we would have probably finished the project in the same timeline without all the change orders or the variation claims that came along the way. So sometimes clients and the project team have really got to step back and say, fast track, are we actually achieving something with this fast track? And clients and the project team, if they're going into a fast track project, then they've also got to understand they're probably more likely to have change orders, variation claims, because they're going to be mistakes, they're going to be changes, and you've just got to accept that a fast track project, you're going to have extra claims that are going to come in.
Okay,
that's disruption.
Paul, final question before we go to the presentation. I'm mindful of your presentation. We've got a question from Amit. Amit goes on to say, a client chooses a contractor to build his house based on lowest price quotation and end up with a bad quality workmanship. Who in this case did not do his task ethically?
I'm not sure that it's necessarily an ethical question. And again, it's another topic. It's really knowing the contractor or the subcontractors you're employing, doing your due diligence, not just awarding projects on price alone, because a cheap project can often become very expensive.
Absolutely.
And in this case, if you've got poor quality, it's going to become very expensive. And that's what clients don't understand, is they want the bargain price, they want the cheapest price, but they haven't employed the right contractor, or the contractor doesn't have the resources. So I said, look, it's poor ethics if you knowingly employ a contractor that's obviously made a mistake and is going to lose money on it. But if you've just employed a contractor for the cheapest price without investigating properly, well, that's not poor ethics, that's just stupidity.
Absolutely. Take it away, Paul. If you can share your screen again. We've got 45 minutes left, and there's so much more to discuss, but we would like to cover all the slides from Paul. So Paul, if you can share your screen again, just making sure you get back on there, and to go to part 2 of the ethics in construction. You've got quite a few slides there as well. You've got about 30 slides to go, which is fantastic. Please, guys, make a lot of notes. Good, all ethics good for your respective professional accreditation as well as institution. Paul, take it away, part 2. And once again, thank you very much indeed.
So why good ethics are important. So I posed a question there, does it pay to be ethical? So do we have that question?
Yes, I've got a question there. And the question is, are good ethics important? It's a yes or a no answer. To me, definitely a 200% yes. But we'll see what the audience says. To me, it's a no-brainer when it comes to delivering service to the client, the consultant, the contractor as well. Paul, I'm just going to stop there. I think it's a unanimous 100% there. All good ethic important, 100%. As we're getting through the webinar, the percentage in terms of ethics are going up. So thank you, Paul, 100% there.
Well, that's a great answer and a relief there. Thanks, Anil. So this just comes from this company, Camino Consulting. So does it pay to do the right thing? Or is it rather a case of profit today, principles tomorrow? So when doing business, it might seem as if doing the right thing will cost more. Surely it's easier just to slip in an extra claim against your client. Surely it's easy just to, if the contractor's made a mistake and undercharged you, to say nothing and pocket the money. So it's a very valid question. Is there really a business case for doing ethical business? So committing to do ethical business can seem like imposing a handicap on earning potential of both yourself and your company. So opportunities for making additional profit at the cost of relatively small indiscretions will frequently come across the path of any business leader. So I'm sure you and Neil, and I'm sure I have, and I'm sure all our participants, almost a daily basis, you have an opportunity where you can score a bit of money from someone else. So.
It's a tricky one, isn't it, Paul? It's a tricky one. It's a balancing act. It's always difficult. I can see where you're coming from, but it's ultimately it's looking at the bigger picture of the client.
Yes, so this goes on and says various studies have clearly demonstrated that companies that commit to good and ethical governance bank more profits at the end of the day. So this example, the study of Journal of Business Ethics, looked at nearly 27% of the 500 largest US public corporations, so those are the ones listed on the stock exchange there, that commit to ethical behavior towards their stakeholders. And now stakeholders is another whole topic we can cover one day. Who are the stakeholders in a project? All emphasize compliance with their code of conduct. And the financial performance of these corporations ranked higher than those who do not. So the corporations, the businesses that committed to doing ethical business, they actually were more profitable. Now that doesn't sound right, because you'd think if someone was stealing or making money at their contractors' expense or at their stakeholders, at their buyers' expense, they would be less profitable. But this study has actually found that they're more profitable. So this is another study. One dishonest co-worker can disrupt an entire workplace. So a vicious cycle can begin with one little white lie from a co-worker diminishing the ability of other employees to read others. So if you've got one dishonest worker, or if you dishonesty, that dishonesty often rubs off on the rest of the team. And it also blinds you to the dishonesty of others, because you're so busy with your own dishonesty that you're not reading properly what other people are doing. So dishonest deeds diminish a person's ability to read others' emotions, or so one dishonest act can set in motion even more dishonesty. Now that is really an important statement. One dishonest act can set in motion even more dishonesty. So such behavior by employees is estimated to come at a $3.7 trillion cost annually worldwide. That's a huge amount of money. So lying and cheating is not only financially costly, as in the case of stealing from a company, for example, or increasing the cost of costly lawsuits, but also can harm interpersonal relationships. It affects relationships. It affects if your employees know you're stealing from the client, you're stealing from subcontractors, what are they going to think of you? Are they going to think that, oh, they better watch what you're stealing from them as well? So it can also harm interpersonal relationships through individuals' ability to detect others' emotions. So if you're crooked, you're possibly not going to pick up that others are being crooked and stealing from you. So I'm just going to run through a few examples, and maybe we don't have too much time for this, but these executives of this construction company pleaded guilty to $15 million of bid rigging in New York. And at the very last line there, it's estimated that this kind of practice costs $100 million a year to construction costs in New York City alone. So this bid rigging. To the second point there, you can see that these people face considerable jail, 3 to 9 years. So accepting bribes, submitting inflated subcontractor bids, fake work orders, and change orders to the client, and misappropriated funds intended to cover subcontractor allowances. So a lot of fraud there. going to cost them jail time. It's going to cost them fines. These again, in the US and America, former engineers being charged with fraud for allegedly forging inspection reports. So we're just looking at what the consequences are. So this guy could face up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, together with another 2-year prison term and $250,000. So fraud can get you in jail, can get you fined, can get assets taken from you. This company, they were responsible for maintenance to US military bases. I think, so they didn't do the maintenance work. They falsified comment cards so the residents of this military base were saying, oh, they're doing excellent service, when in fact they hadn't even done the maintenance. So what were the consequences? So instead of promptly repairing these defects for these US military personnel in the houses provided to them by the military, these poor people had to live in poorly maintained houses, maybe with mold in there, so they were getting sick from it. And of course, the assets were, as we all know, when assets aren't maintained properly, it costs more at the end of the day, because they eventually fall into worse disrepair. If there's a leaking pipe not fixed, what else is that leaking pipe damaging? So there's a whole lot of consequences of this unethical behavior. Consequences to the residents, consequences to the client who's going to have a product that gets damaged even further. And this contractor then got fined over $70 million of fines. These construction executives are charged with perjury after workers' deaths. So the Occupational Safety and Health Administration found that the victims had not been trained to recognize and avoid work-related hazards. And they willfully placed the victims in danger, unsafe work, and the failure of employers to follow federal safety and health regulations designed to keep workers out of harm's way, as it says here, is absolutely unacceptable. So,
and Paul, the cave-in protection, we see that in many areas in construction where there's massive trenches, but the support aren't there. Is that, do you think, again, it's a lack of awareness and maybe more induction toolbox talk on site?
I think it comes from a number of things. It comes from, as you said, inductions. And we saw the one example in the previous section where he hadn't trained the people to be aware of the dangers. It is often just the contractor taking a shortcut, and it's too expensive to do it this way. We'll take a chance. And of course, sometimes luck's not on your side, but safety should not be about luck anyway.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So this, again, coming to the quality, this contractor, they had to pay a $637,000 fine because they intentionally cut or burned sections of steel that make up parts of the bridge supports, and then took steps to conceal those damages. So poor quality, they tried to conceal it. What's it done? It's shortened the life of the bridges, as we see on the last point there, and they had to pay the settlement. Of course, there's poor publicity because this is now being broadcast, and in addition, in paying the settlement, they had to adopt an ethics and compliance code. So here we can see quality, it's an ethics and compliance issue, and train all employees to be ethical and comply with the quality requirements. So why are ethics important? So being ethical sets the tone of the relationship between the contracting parties. So unethical practices lead to a breakdown of relationships. And we saw that in some of the questions we had. Yeah. The project manager's now unethical, there's a contractor, well, there's a breakdown of relationship. If we inflate our claim, our variation claim or change order, well, there's a breakdown in relationship because the client's immediately then going to, when he finds out, say, I'm dealing with a dishonest contractor. And when unethical behavior is uncovered, it leads to a breakdown in trust. And trust is so important on construction projects. So good ethical practices are an essential part of a company's reputation. Do you have a reputation for being ethical, for paying your contractors on time, for settling issues amicably with a win-win for all parties? Do you have a relationship, a reputation for paying your workers fairly, for delivering good quality, for being safety conscious? And importantly, unethical behavior is contagious. Unethical behavior breeds more unethical behavior. So what do I mean by this? Well, others see that unethical behavior is acceptable and also commit unethical practices. So you as a contractor, you go and tell somebody, let's just add in a few extra cubic meters into this bill. Let's also claim extra money we're not entitled for. Let's leave reinforcing out there. What do the workers receiving those instructions think? They think unethical practices are acceptable.
Absolutely.
So you open up your business, your company, to them committing unethical, to them committing fraud, because if they see that fraud or unethical practice is acceptable, they're more likely to steal from your company, from your business. And I can quote an example, but unfortunately we're short of time. Workers, it's amazing on construction projects. And I always say to my project managers, I mean, those workers on the project, they know exactly when the boss left the project, what time he arrived in the morning, how long he took lunch or whatever. They know all those details, and they're putting in that file in their memory. And if they see that you leave work early, late, or take extended lunch breaks, they're going to do the same thing. If they see you loading stuff in the back of your car, the truck to take home to fix your house, they're going to think that's legitimate and it's okay to take some cement, some Rio home to their home. So unethical behavior, others who see it often then think it's legitimate.
So Paul, just a quick one there. I mean, obviously, as you're going through those where you touch about unethical behavior, it's contagious. I mean, what do we do in companies then? Do you have like ethical champions, ethics champion, just to make sure wherever, I mean, construction or you, so you got a big project, you know, X amount value of project. What do you have? Do you have like, just like we have health and safety officers, is there something like ethics officers, just to make sure they keep reinforcing and inculcating those values to make sure unethical issues and behaviors don't happen on site?
Well, I think the first thing with ethics comes to leadership. So it comes from the top. And unfortunately, we have so many bad leaders in our countries where we have corrupt politicians. And I'm not talking about African countries. I'm talking about across the world. I mean, in our country as well. So people see this poor leadership, this lying, the stealing, the corruptness, and they think it's standard practice, and it filters down to everybody in the society. And so it starts with the leadership at the top. So if you, the company director, if you, the chairman, you've also got to be careful what you're doing, and asking favors or saying, oh, I just need a couple of pockets of cement to take home, and then you're not paying for it. It's fine to take that, but be seen to be paying for it, because, you know, I became so careful on doing that, because it's very easy to say, okay, there's some leftover rebar, I need it for a fence at my home, I'll just take it, nobody's going to miss it. but people are watching you. So you need to set the example and say, okay, those off-cut rebars, they would have been sold for scrap. So I will pay you the value for it. And that's what I eventually got into the habit of doing. So it starts with leadership. The second thing is to stamp it out as soon as you see it, to pull people up and say, this is not acceptable behavior.
Absolutely.
So whether you actually need an ethical champion, I don't think so. But it comes with the culture of the company. What is the culture of the company? And is that behavior encouraged, or is it stamped out?
All right, thank you.
And people hurt by unethical practices make revengeful, unethical responses. And I think there was a similar a question that didn't quite allude to that earlier. Well, the project manager's unethical, they're treating me badly. So what does the contractor do? He acts in out, and he's going to, well, I'm not getting paid fairly. And you know, the course that I've put together with my American partner, he ran a cabinetry firm, and he tells the story in the course that we present that one day, one of his workers said, oh, it doesn't matter how we do this because the client's not paying us enough money for it. So, and partners said, well, that's not the point, you know, whether the client's paying us, we do it right, we do it according to specification. But it's so easy to act, and we see it, I mean, when we're driving to work and someone cuts you off, immediately you get all tense and you react in response. And that's what happens when you treat badly. So, you know, clients and project managers, they forget that there's often a response. So we'll pay the contractor late, but there's a response to that. And sometimes that response is not great, you know, so it actually costs you money. And then often, as we said, someone who's engaged in unethical behavior with no negative outcomes for themselves, continue in unethical ways, often with the actions becoming more unethical. So if someone's not caught out with stealing $100, next time they'll steal $200. And if they get away with it with $200, they'll, so it gets higher and higher. So yeah. So unethical behavior is contagious, and one has to remember that. So unethical behaviors often lead to increased costs, both for contractors and clients. So our ethics or lack of ethics express who we are and define our dealings with others. And unethical behaviors can lead to poor media attention. We saw that in some of those. I mean, do you really want your company on the front page of a newspaper because you paid bribes, or because you produced poor quality work? And of course, unethical behaviors lead to fines. We saw that. Prison time. You really, long after the event, you committed this fraud for your company, and even after retirement, you can face fraud charges and go to jail. Do you really want to do prison times? Is it worth it? You could be barred from working in foreign countries. When I say that, your company could be blocked for working particular clients. We saw that in one of the examples. And as we saw, poor ethics often blind you to others' poor ethics. And poor ethics lead to poor quality projects. We saw that, creating problems for future owners. Poor ethics lead to poor safety and accidents, which cost money, cost lives. Poor ethics lead to good people leaving the company. Many good people, they don't want to work for a corrupt company. They don't want to be cheated. They don't want to be forced to cheat or steal. Poor ethics can lead to unhappy employees, which leads to poor productivity. Employees aren't paid on time, or there's discrimination. Companies that rely on fraud, corruption, and unethical means to make profit are often wasteful and inefficient. Now, I had a quantity surveyor one project, and he was so busy looking for scheming ways to make money, that he was overlooking the legitimate claims, you know, to actually pull him out. Just forget about being clever, just measure the work as we should be paid and find the money there, because you're actually missing stuff. Because and often companies that are relying, and I found that with projects that had a big profit margin, we often seldom made that project margin, we made less. And projects that had a small margin, a 5% margin, we made 7 or 10% on the project. Because when you know you have to work for the money, you work, and you're not wasteful. But when you're stealing, you end up often being wasteful on the project.
But Paul, just quickly, when you talk about the young QS trying to get as much money as, sometimes is the pressure to bring fees in. And this is where the mentoring comes in, and the culture and the leadership, because the young graduate and the young professional, they're driven by fees, and it's a culture, right, to bring more fees in the company.
Well, that's where it again comes down to ethical. I find with every one of my projects, I made sure I was paid for every cent or whatever, every dollar of work that I did. I did nothing for free.
Yeah.
But there was only one project where we knowingly, call it, stole money, and that again was in response to that unethical behavior with an unethical project manager. And it's not right what we did. We got away with it, but you look back and say, well, was that the right thing?
In hindsight, when you look back, you say, is it worth it?
No, what happened? The project manager was unethical. It didn't hurt them. It hurt the client, their clients, and the money went into our company's bank balance. So, was there any benefit to me personally? No. Was there any loss to the project manager who was unethical? No.
Yeah. So I think, Paul, what we just talked is about reflecting on the bigger picture, and also looking at the culture, and basically looking at the bigger picture. In 10 years' time, when we think back, was it worth it?
Yeah. And,
all right, Paul, thank you.
So yeah, contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers don't want to work for clients that engage in unethical practices. So subcontractors don't want to work for an unethical contractor. Contractors don't want to work for an unethical client. So in compensation, they may increase their prices to compensate for the additional problems they may encounter working for that company or client. So moving on to the next section is, can poor ethics ever be justified? So
okay, so I've got a question up, guys, quickly on that one. Can Paul, obviously we've got 22 minutes left, and Paul's got the last part as well. So we will just take this question quickly. Can poor ethics ever be justified? What do you think the Paul would say? I mean, you would expect probably what, 100% there of no?
I doubt that, because I think we all justify things in our own mind. So we were treated badly, or this is the done thing. So we'll see what the answers come.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So getting into it. So I'm just gonna give you 2 more seconds. Like I said, we've got 22 minutes to go. Paul, thank you very much indeed so far. It's such an eye opener. And of course, everybody, while waiting for the pros to call, please put all your questions and answers. We'll try to answer all of them, and your statement as well. I think it's been a fantastic webinar, already 1 hour and 40 minutes into it. So I'm just going to end the poll now and share the results. So, whoa, can poor ethics ever be justified? We've got a 26% say yes, and a whopping 74% says no. So like you said, it depends, Paul.
Yes, so we'll look at some of the excuses, and if we
So
can put it
we'll
that
try
way.
to decipher the 26%, how we can get them to get back in there.
So,
All right, thank you.
these are not excuses for unethical behavior. So these are not excuses, but they are used. So I'm only following orders. That's not an excuse for committing an unethical, for committing fraud. Everybody does it. I'm sure you've heard that, Anil, and particularly in countries where maybe not Mauritius, but in some countries where bribery is the standard thing. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
Why can't you just be the different person and not do it? Lead by example. They aren't treating me or us fairly, so it's okay to get them back. So the project managers not treating us fairly, the client's not paying us, so it's okay to give them a substandard product, to not follow all the quality. No, that is not an excuse. It's your reputation on the line. I'm too busy. So this is often, well, I'm too busy to check things. I'm too busy to worry about if they're working safely or unsafely. No, that is not an excuse. You are being paid to deliver a project. You're being paid to do a job, whether that's quality control, whether that's safety manager. If you're the project manager on that project, you are responsible for everything on that project, quality, safety. So nobody will notice. Now, this is a favorite with contractors. Why worry about the quality? We'll just cover it up. Nobody will notice. Nobody will find out. No, just be proud of your work. Take pride in everything you do, whether someone's going to see it. And I can quote examples on that. So yeah, it won't make a difference. A favorite, they've got so much money anyway, or they're making so much money. So, and that's with a client, well, we'll just charge them extra. You know, it's the government, it's a government job. They've got so much money for this project, or it's a big corporation, or you're doing a project for Coca-Cola or whoever, McDonald's, they've got so much money they can pay for it. So it's okay if I get paid. We claim more than we. It'll cost us more to do it properly or correctly, or employ another contractor. So no, this is not an excuse. Do the job properly. I'm not paid enough, or we aren't paid enough, or we're losing money. So I think I discussed that example a little bit earlier. We're behind schedule. Well, this is a favorite one. We're running late, so we'll just take shortcuts here. We can't be bothered about quality because we're running late. Another favorite, if they're too stupid not to notice, then it's their problem. So, so sometimes we will work for stupid clients, stupid project managers. Maybe you'll have a stupid contractor working for you, but that's not an excuse to take advantage of them.
Yeah,
it's the only way to make money. So we need to steal to make money. Does that justify a fraud because you're not making money? And this is particularly for politicians. You may have noticed I don't like politicians, but the end justifies the means. So the project will be worth it when it's finished. So it doesn't matter how it was done or who got hurt along the way, or the lies and ethical lapses that got the project built. So the end justifies the means. No, the end doesn't justify the means. Do the job properly. So bottom line, there are no excuses to justify poor ethics in construction or in any business. So what should not be regarded as unethical? And I know Anil touched on this, and I had an example here. I'm not going to go into the detail. We may lots. We had a question, I think, what's not unethical behaviors. We'll just move on. So yeah, we had a project. We actually made lots of money. How much is lots of money? And what is the right amount of profit for a contractor to make? So this was a project. We came up with an alternate method of constructing it. We had the right piece of equipment, which other contractors didn't have. We'd done a similar project with many, like 15, 20 years before, so I knew a formwork solution to do it. So at the end of the day, we made lots of money. So why did we make a large profit? Well, we had an advantage with the crane we owned, which was easy to set up. So we had that big 50-ton lattice boom, which could almost reach the top. And I worked out if we just put an extra meter of fill that the crane went on top of, then we could reach the top. And other contractors didn't have that advantage. So it was relatively cheap to hire. We'd worked on we were working on other projects, so there was a bit of shared overheads that between the projects. All contractors were busy, so the markup on the project was a little bit bigger than would normally be. So instead of being 5 or 10%, we probably had a starting markup of 15 to 20% profit. We developed an alternative, innovative construction method. Previous experience gave us edge. We used the right construction team. We had the right people, the right number. In fact, we used less people than we thought we were going to do when we priced the project. We had good productivity. We had no waste, no mistakes. And of course, we had luck. So often, we had good weather. Everything went right, as couldn't have been more perfect. Probably once in a lifetime project when things just absolutely worked out. So do you begrudge us making a big profit?
And Paul, just you talk about luck as well. Sometimes, you do get project where you've got good people, good synergy, and good collaboration, and that you can't buy.
Yeah, and it doesn't always happen because too often it goes the other way, where you just got a little bit of bad luck, or one subby let you down, a supplier let you down, there was bad weather, and who takes the pain with that? Well, the contractor takes the pain. So all the days when the contractor didn't make the budgeted profit, he made less, despite putting all the effort in, all the hard work in, and things didn't go according to plan, and he sometimes even lost money,
And with COVID-19,
the client doesn't pay more because the contractor had things went a bit messy on the project.
Especially with COVID-19 as well, it didn't help.
Yeah, so we made a large profit, but on the other hand, the client was happy. The project was finished 6 weeks earlier, which is also part of the reason why we made extra money. So they saved supervision costs. They got their tailings dam back to service quicker. There was less inconvenience to their operations, less risks from severe storm flooding. Project was good quality. They paid a competitive price because presumably it was in budget, so what they expected. It was a problem-free project. Everything went like clockwork. They possibly learned an alternative construction method, which we produced to do the job. So it was a win-win for everyone. And our profits, maybe I'm biased being the contractor who did it, I'm saying they were hard earned. So can you begrudge a contractor for making a healthy profit when everything went right?
Awesome.
So what should not be viewed as unethical? Well, submitting change orders, that's what you said. So just because you submitted a legitimate change order for delays or extra work or changes where the contractor is entitled to claim for these and providing these a fair reflection of their entitlement. So that's not unethical. Making a large profit on a project where these have been earned. Not where they've been obviously earned by fraud or by overinflating the bill or whatever, but where these are. Why would it be unethical for a contractor to make a large profit? Or for the client on that matter, if the contractor made money and the client got their project way under budget, well then great.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are reasons to deduct monies from contractors, subcontractors, or suppliers for reasonable, valid reasons which are communicated to them. So that's not unethical. Applying the terms of the contract in a fair manner, even when this could cost one of the parties. So that's not unethical if you're following the contract fairly, and it's selecting a contractor not only based on price, but providing the selection can be justified and is transparent. So the fact that you didn't choose the cheapest contractor, but you chose the one that could do the job with the right quality, the right resources, delivering the project on time. So my view, these shouldn't be viewed as being unethical. So moving on, I'll just go to the summary there in conclusion. So we've discussed a lot about ethics. So what is ethics? What then is ethics? After we've talked for 2 hours about ethics. So first, ethics refers to the well-founded standards of right and wrong. What is right? What is wrong? That prescribes what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, benefits to society, fairness, or specific virtues. And secondly, ethics refers to the study and development of one's ethical standards. So as mentioned, feelings, laws, social norms can deviate from what is ethical. So just following the laws doesn't mean that you're ethical. Following your feelings might not be ethical. So it's necessary to constantly examine one's standards to ensure that they are reasonably and well-founded. And that's the point of our presentation. We're asking you to examine what you think is ethical or not ethical. So ethics also means then the continuous effort of studying our own moral beliefs and our moral conduct, and striving to ensure that we and the institutions we help to shape, the company we work for, live up to the standards that are reasonable and solidly based. So I think that's quite an important slide. So ethics is not about just being nice to people, just following the law, just following what my church or what my religion says. So being ethical, this is a quick summary, is about how contractors deal with the client, how they deal with their employees, and how they treat their suppliers and subcontractors. How do you treat the other stakeholders? It's about how clients treat their contractors. An unethical behavior, as we've seen, can lead to a loss of reputation, which impacts future work, can be costly, and contractors have faced lengthy legal battles, suffered large monetary fines for unethical behavior. Could even mean that contractors are barred from working for some clients. But equally, clients need to be ethical. So it's a two-way street. When clients have a reputation for unethical behavior, then contractors will avoid pricing their projects or will add additional monies to their price to compensate for the problems they know they'll have when they deal with that client. Subcontractors may deliberately take shortcuts or use inferior products to compensate for not being fairly treated. Ultimately, the client will be paying more for their project. The unethical behavior costs money. So in the same way, contractors who engage in unethical behavior with their subcontractors and suppliers may also find it difficult to find suppliers and subcontractors to work for them in the future. Or their suppliers and subcontractors will be unwilling to put maximum effort into the project. So you treat your subcontractors and suppliers badly, they're going to be less happy to help you when the project is in trouble. And we've all been in trouble. We've all had to put in the phone call to a subcontractor and say,
Yeah.
I need you to I need that extra effort. If they've been treated fairly, they're going to help you out. If you've treated them unfairly, they're not going to help you out. So contractors who mistreat their employees will inevitably find that productivities on their projects aren't what they should be, which costs them more. So in some cases, unhappy employees have been known to deliberately damage equipment. Sure, we've all had that on projects, materials and completed work, or even steal from the project. If they feel they're not getting paid fairly, they're going to steal to make up the difference or sabotage the project. So ethical behavior is about being honest and fair in all of your dealings. It means not compromising safety or quality. It means complying with the conditions of the project and paying what is due and fair. It's about not profiting from somebody else's misfortune. As we discussed, unethical behavior is contagious. People who witness unethical acts assume this is acceptable behavior. And people who are dealt with unethically often respond in an unethical manner. And people who are unethical are often blind to others' unethical behavior. I'm sure we've all been guilty of being unethical at some stage, all of us. But is this the way you always operate? That's the question you have to ask. We don't have to engage in unethical behavior to be profitable, as we saw. In fact, as we saw, companies that act in an ethical manner, who employ ethical people, who deal with all stakeholders in an ethical manner, are often more profitable than companies that are not ethical. So conducting business in an ethical manner takes a conscious decision. It takes leadership. That's what we discussed.
Absolutely.
Make the decision to be ethical in all your actions today. Take the lead, all of you out there. So simply ask yourself these questions. And this is really the final slide we're getting to. Ask yourself these questions. Does my winning depend on someone else losing? Or is everybody a winner? So
Wow.
Do I have to make money by stealing from somebody else? Can we build this project together so that we are all winners, subcontractors, suppliers, client, contractor, project team? Do I only consider myself or my company when making decisions? Or do you consider the impact, the effect of your decision on others? Or are you just thinking of yourself?
Wow.
Do I judge others' ethics based on how I act? Or am I biased and judge them more harshly because they did well or I failed? So often we judge people and say, oh, they made large profit. That contractor made a large profit. They must have stolen from us to make such a large profit. Or that project was so successful. It must have been because they were unethical. Judge people fairly. Am I always totally honest in my dealings with others? Are you honest the way you communicate with people, how you deal with people,
Absolutely.
how you put together that change order, how you put together the contract? An important question, would I be happy if someone did this to me or treated me in this way? And that's really, almost the golden rule. Ask yourself, what if somebody else did this to me? Would I be happy or would I be unhappy? If I would be unhappy, why do you have to do that? Do I treat people with respect? Respect is so important in construction, in any business. And again, that's another whole topic we could go into.
Absolutely.
Respect. What does respect mean? An important question. Am I proud of my projects? Am I proud of the quality? Am I proud of the project that I've delivered? And that comes from a client side as well, because so often projects are horrible because the client has tried to save money and they're not really benefiting. All they're doing is benefiting someone's pocket. But is it leaving a lasting legacy that you're going to be proud of. Do I always do my work diligently? As we saw earlier, doing work diligently is also part of ethics. And are my actions always ethical? So there's just a few questions, simple questions to ask yourself. And I think probably the most important is there in the middle. Would I be happy if someone did this to me?
Absolutely.
So a final quote, and this comes from Warren Buffett. He's made billions of dollars investing in companies that he's researched, and he said, there are 3 traits you should look for in people. First one is integrity, the second one is intelligence, and the third one is energy. So you want to deal with people who have energy, you have to deal with people who've got intelligence.
Yeah.
Obviously, but it says that integrity, without the first one, without integrity, the last 2 will kill you. So you employ a good worker, intelligent worker who has no integrity, it's going to kill you. It's going to kill your company, because integrity is so important. Integrity, ethics is about doing your job properly. It's about dealing with people correctly. It's about not stealing, not committing fraud. So I think, and here's an experienced business. I think he's 90 years old. He's been investing in some of the biggest companies in the United States for the last, I don't know, 50, 60 years. And when he judges a company, integrity is one of the most important things he looks for in a company, is integrity. When he's dealing with people, the important thing he's looking for is integrity. Integrity is honesty, is ethics. It's so that's what he sees. And you can be the best person in the world, but if you don't have good ethics, you don't have good integrity, you're not honest, you're setting yourself up to fail.
Absolutely.
So thanks. So sorry, that's
been
a little bit longer than we would have
No,
liked.
it's all fine, Paul. We've got a few questions as well.
A lot of information. We probably
yes,
a lot of points in there.
And also you will see there's a Paul book. I've loved the green one there and the red one, which is the 5th book there. I mean, it's all on Amazon as well. And Paul, if you can stop sharing now, we'll just pick up a few questions. I think I really want you to, if you can answer those few questions from the colleague. Can we have just a big round of applause, because today Paul has gone so deep in ethics, like really meaningful. You know, when we do meditation, we go deep into into our soul. What Paul did today is really go deep into ethics and all the things that we think. Paul has just put it down on the slides. So Paul, I can't thank you enough today for really give us a refresher, a thought-provoking as well going forward in our career, and I'm sure we'll pick that up. But let's just pick up some quick question as well, if you've got some time, Paul, if that's okay. We've got CT Fatima. Well done, Paul. That's the end of that. But there was a comment from an anonymous attendee. And the anonymous attendee goes on to say that today's topic is highly relatable. Unethical behaviors and corruption really cost all stakeholders. Contractors compromising on quality to recoup profit due to bribe paid to be awarded is rampant in my dear country and continent in Africa. Okay, that's a statement. There's a question from Shamal. Now, this question comes up in many interviews, Paul. Does giving or receiving end-of-year gift from suppliers, contractors count as a bribe or unethical? What's your take on that one?
Well, again, I think it's important that companies actually have a procedure on what is an acceptable gift and what is not, because I've had tickets to rugby matches, but then there's tickets to rugby matches which are flying people to another city, putting them up in the best hotel, having whatever. So where do you actually stop with that? So I think it's important that employees know what is the gift procedure. And I know when we dealt with big employees like big clients like BHP or whatever, they had a procedure for gifts which they gave to all their contractors. So to limit it, and you always, whatever you receive, you always, no matter how impartial you are, you always might think, well, that subcontractor gave me a nice bottle of wine at the end of the year or whatever. Maybe I should be fair to him. But it's, I think, within reason, small gifts, and sometimes those small gifts, often if I got like a pack of 3 wines, I would hand them out to others in the team or
yes.
whatever.
And Paul, often in big companies, we've got gift register protocol as well. So you can declare the gift.
Absolutely.
So then everybody knows about it. And that way you've kind of making sure it's all there and it's ethical.
I think that's the way it's got to be done. So I think the company should have a procedure. It should be recorded some way. So that it's all up front.
Just quickly, there was a comment made from Ning Lee. It would be better for ethics in construction to be practiced from the top tier of the management, walk the talk. With this approach being encouraged from the top, ethical behavior would be easier to be practiced further than the change. However, this does not negate individual ethical behavior. Ethical behavior or unethical behavior does have an impact to reputation. We talked about that already. There's a question from my colleague Prakash. Hi, Paul, fantastic talk. As a consultant designing and managing project, we have to comply to construction guidelines and bylaws. But very often, we are compelled to adopt the strict minimum just to be compliant in view of maximizing developers' profit, knowing that much could have been done to be bettered for the project. What's your thought on that? Is it unethical to be guided by the developer to maximize profit?
Well, I think I touched a little bit on that, and I do feel that developers, clients from the development side are often unethical, trying to squeeze the last drop, and where it's all about how much money they make. And I see it in this country, and I think it's all over the world, At the end of the day, you get a bad product, product that blights the neighborhood. People have to live in that product, if it's an apartment building. But at the end of the question comes from the designer, and sometimes it's unethical because you haven't pushed back against that client. Why haven't you pushed back? Because you're scared of losing the next project. But sometimes you also have to stand up, and it's your reputation. It's your project. Forever and a day, that project, you designed it. If there's any comebacks on it, it's your design. It's your company. It's your company's name. And if the project looks second rate, are people going to employ you to say, oh, that engineer, that designer, that architect, this is the kind of product that they deliver. It's a second-rate product. And sometimes you actually just got to avoid those clients who are only interested in profit at whatever it is. And it goes the same for contractors. Sometimes you've got to avoid certain clients, no matter how desperate you are, but it's your name that's going to be on that project. When things go wrong, when there's a leak or whatever, the first person they phone is the contractor.
Absolutely.
And then they're going to phone, if it's a design problem, then you're going to go to the designer. When do they ever contact the developer or the client and say, it's your shitty product, or you wanted a cheap product, and it never comes back almost on that developer or whatever.
Okay.
So that's what you're going to remember as the designer. It's your name on that product.
Absolutely. We've got a few more questions which I want to conclude, Paul. Siti Fatima say, oh yes, Anil, in the safety field, we do practice awarding workers, not just the safety officers, with good exemplary ethical behaviors, aside from being compliant to health and safety. Paul is right. It's all indeed all about leadership. Thank you, Siti. Love to mention about how do we ensure quality certificate needed during construction to ensure quality of material are not fake. What's your experience in terms of what other measures do you put in place to make sure certificate produced, whether it's going to be for concrete, cube, or for any other matters? How do we go about that, Paul, based on your experience?
Look, it's obviously contractor can't check all of the certificates. You like to think that you deal, or you should only deal with reliable suppliers and subcontractors. So it maybe doesn't mean buying the cheapest materials. So so I think that's the only steps that you could really take. I mean, sometimes, you know, if they're manufacturing the product, you can go visit the factory, see what their quality standards are like, and you can't do that for every product and all the small nuts and bolts that you're getting. But if you've got a major piece of structural steel or major electrical component, well, let's go and visit them. What is the reputation from that company? But you can't always protect yourself. And I have another example of a big European company that delivered poor quality concrete to American Defense Force in Africa, where they faked the results, water results. They went and bought bottled water from the from the shop, and they tested that, and that's the test results. But of course, they were not using bottled water for their concrete. But you know, this is a big multinational contractor that you would have expected better of. Okay, those executives are now facing jail time in America for that. But yeah, you can't always protect, but you must take the basic steps of being able to trust your suppliers that you employ.
Absolutely. There's a question from Amit. A company relieving their employees in bad time, especially in COVID-19, is it ethical?
Sorry?
A company laying off their staff. So a company laying off their staff in bad times. The bad time can be COVID-19 or recession. Is it ethical?
Well, I think it often is. It's when those companies use that as an excuse just to get rid of everybody or whatever. But companies can't, you know, we've in our time, I mean, unfortunately, construction is very cyclical. So we have had to lay off workers. We've always, the companies I've worked with, tried to find other jobs for them, move them within divisions in the company. Even on occasions, we've lent them out to other contractors for a time, because you don't want to lose good people and then have to look for good people the end of the day. So the general answer is yes. I wouldn't necessarily call it unethical, but sometimes contractors do use an excuse.
Okay, thank you. We've got two more questions there, Paul. One question is, can you link ethics with mental health? I mean, is there some similarity there with ethics affecting our mental health?
Well, I think unethical behaviors could impact mental health. I mean, if your boss is making you, or you know that you've got to commit fraud, well, obviously you're going to worry about it. If you are ethical, you're going to say, well, I don't actually agree with that, but so yes, but the fact that if you discriminated against or whatever knowingly, and we could do a whole thing on discrimination, which I cover in my project management course on discrimination and how it affects people and their health. I mean, at the bottom line, everybody's trying to work hard in construction. It's not an easy line of work. Why do you make people's lives even more difficult?
Absolutely.
Construction's hard enough. Just treat people fairly. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's already hard enough. Long hours, pressure. Just last
I'm not
question
saying
there.
look after people that aren't performing. If a person doesn't perform, well, they need to be told that. And if they don't pull up their socks, then maybe they have to go.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question, very interesting question from Prakash. Prakash goes on to say, being a project QS, I had to certify a claim and a contract is strictly as per the contract provision, which I did. However, while doing so, I was also aware that the client, which was a public authority, was not making the right use of the fund for which it was earmarked. In fact, the client was using money from grant under COVID fund to upgrade their offices for which it was not meant to. So they've used fund from a different pot, if you like. By doing so, is this unethical, Paul?
Yeah, that's a bit of a complex question, and I'm not sure I understood all of it, but
so basically what the colleague is saying there is that there's been a pot allocated for different fund, which has been used for a different project. So the fund allocated which was misused for a different one. Is that unethical? I think
well, I would say yes, it is unethical. I mean, you can't. It's difficult to say to the client, well, sorry, I'm not doing that because the money's not spent for there. I mean, that's not your place. I mean, you could maybe report it as a whistleblower to newspapers or to politicians or whatever if it's a misuse of funds. I mean, sometimes money is shuffled between projects, even big clients. They might have underspent on one project and there's money left over which they can spend on another project. So in terms of that COVID funds, if that money had been used and there was a pot of money left over, maybe they're just moving the money across.
Absolutely.
If the people who should have got the money didn't get the money and it was spent somewhere else, well, obviously that is unethical. So
absolutely. Amit says to you, thanks a ton, Paul. The webinar was a booster. Booster does. Okay, so the webinar was a booster and does for many of the. It is a booster actually because this is your third webinar. So the first two was a jab. And this is a booster. Thank you for that one, Paul. Ningli said, thank you for a very insightful topic that requires us to reflect and be conscious of our action and learn to be a person with ethic both in work and personally. And finally, we've got a statement from Ibrahim.
Sorry, just to touch on, and I think that person, previous comments, that's really what I wanted to do, because I think ethics is a big subject and we just think of it as being stealing and fraud and whatever. So I wanted just to make people think that it's a broader topic. It's about how we treat people. It's about how we do business or whatever. So it's a bit of a reflection, and we're all guilty. We're all guilty. I mean, I'm not the most. They're not angel wings growing out my back here, So yeah, we all do things that maybe we shouldn't be doing, and it's a matter of reflecting and making more careful choices in the way we do things.
And we've got Ibrahim who goes on to say all professional bodies have their ethical standard required for the members. In a situation of clash of interest between the company requirement and the minimum standard my profession require from me, which one do I follow? So what Ibrahim is saying there is that all bodies has got their rules of conduct, and of course the company has one. Which one does he follow, Paul? Maybe just few wisdom there.
Well, I have this in my safety presentation, because often you go into you've got your company safety requirements, you've got the national safety requirements, you've got the client safety requirements. Well, which one you follow? Well, you follow the ones, and you've got your own personal ones. But you follow the ones where the person is, you're not going to kill or injure somebody on your project. So who cares what the client's requirements are in terms of safety? Who cares what your company's requirements in terms of safety or whatever? At the end of the day, your project must be safe. It must be administered in such a fashion that nobody is going to be injured or killed on your project.
Absolutely.
The same goes with the ethics, and that's what we said right in the beginning. Ethics is not about laws, it's not about requirements, it's the bigger picture. So what are you doing what is right? Forget about what your company wants, forget about what the client or your professional body thinks is ethics. Ethics is about what is doing what is right, doing what is fair, doing to people as you would like them to do to you.
Wow, awesome. Handam goes on, thanks for a wonderful session, very informative, an eye-opener for ethical behaviors and a reminder for construction professional. Thanks, Paul, for the wonderful webinar. And we've got Krishof saying, thank you, Paul and Anil, for such an in-depth, informative 2-hour session on ethics, massively needful for the Mauritian construction industry. So I've just got a survey, which I'm just going to launch now. And the survey is, before we conclude the webinar, based on the presentation today, do you feel ethically right and ready to promote ethical behavior and to kickstart your weekend, or to do things what you think is right and how you want to be treated, as Paul say? So let's just see what the Paul say as well there before we conclude the webinar, of course. And please also send me your certificate attendance at anil@cbtto.com. So based on the presentation today, do you feel ethically right and ready to promote ethical behaviors? So it'd be good to see that one from you guys as we conclude almost the webinar today. So just Paul, quickly as well, while we're waiting for the poll to kick to obviously there's 75 of us still watching you. How do you see the future of ethical behaviors in our industry? Do we need to do more webinars, more collaboration? Does university need to introduce ethics, which I believe wasn't a module on its own?
I think that would be a good idea. I think it is very hard and people are facing pressures, and that's what I've tried to show here. It's easy for me to sit back and say, well, you must be ethical, and people are facing challenges to make as much money. They're being pressurized by their company. There's bribery and corruption that's rampant in their country. But, you know, the change has to start with one person. The change has to come with, you know, your leadership. You know, and people actually going out and leading and doing what is right, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to have a good night's sleep knowing that you've done things right. So, you know, it's about your conscience. But yes, I think it is leadership, so the change has to come from the top as well. As I say, it's even from the government. You know, if people watch what some politicians do and think that lying and, as I say, corruption is right, well, that's the standard that filters down. And you see it with company directors and the way some of them get away with some things. You know, it's unacceptable. You know, but people follow that lead, and
Paul, just a quick one as well, Paul. From university point of view, I didn't recall many ethics module being undertaken, except maybe as a chapter on ethics. Do you feel that it's high time to introduce those as a module on its own?
Yes, I think it's important. And, you know, in my our construction project management course, which we're launching in the coming week with my partner in California, one of the discussions is on ethics. So we've got 24 units in 2 units in each in 12 modules, and half a unit is discussing ethics. So certainly from my point of view, I think ethics is so important that it needs to be included in a project manager training course. So answer your question directly, yes, it should be in college and university courses, there should be part of ethics because it's an important subject.
Because I've just got a comment coming from Anishta as well. So thank you, Paul. Amazing presentation on ethics. I believe ethics should form part of university module. And I think quite rightly say there as well. I'm just going to relaunch the poll quickly because I'm just getting issues with regard to the polling. So please, can you just revote, please? I'm just going to re-poll and finish that off as we go through. So Paul, we'll just wait for the poll to come in. I don't know if you can see it. Geographically, I'm having an issues. So I'm just going to try to relaunch that poll again. I do apologize. And thank you very much indeed, everyone. If you've got any comments, please let us know as well. Yeah, so please keep voting as we go along. There's few people can't vote for whatever reason there as well. So Paul, did you, before I share the result and conclude the webinar, you talked about a construction project management course. When is that being launched and where can we have access to that?
It's an online course and you basically download the modules, the 12 modules, and at the end of each module you've got to answer some questions and before you can move on to the next module, and at the end of the course you basically get a certificate of attendance. So as I said, it's about 30 hours of training, but it's being launched first of all in America and the United States, and it's going to take a few weeks before it's available to a wider audience, because if you're in the United States, you're going to get a whole paper manual with all the slides printed out, homework and questions to fill in, extra reading, and you get a copy of my book. Now, obviously, that gets a bit more difficult because you can't post all of that out to Nigeria or to South Africa or Mauritius because the postage and everything else. So there'll be an online version and maybe it'll be a different price. So I'm not sure exactly all the things that have boxes that have got to be ticked to receive the payment. So we're hoping that my partner will launch the course that will be available in the United States from next week. It said the end of February it would be available. I know it's advertised on his website, but I'm not sure that it's actually available. I'm trying to get the price reduced because I think it's a bit expensive, but obviously he sells similar courses and he doesn't think so. And then it'll be available in a few weeks' time, hopefully.
And Paul, you will be able to send us the link for me to share with all the colleagues watching today and everybody registered for us to access that course, because it seems like a good course as well for that one.
Yes, yeah, you could go to the website and see what other courses he's being sold there. Yeah, and we're then going to do other courses. So we'll do one on managing subcontractors, which will be, I think it's 5 modules. We're going to do one on contract administration. So we cover things like insurance and liabilities and so on. That's also 5 modules. And sorry, there's another course. So there will be more courses to come in the same.
Okay,
not as big as the construction management one we've done.
Okay, Paul. So I'm just going to share the result with you. Look, it's a amazing 100% there, Paul, after 2 hours and 30 minutes. So I can't thank you enough. The question was, based on the presentation today, do you feel ethically right and ready to promote ethical behavior? And we've got 100%. Thank you. Can we have a big round of applause, everyone? If you can just give up for Paul's time, for giving back. And really to thank you, Paul, because you've gone into really immense amount of detail to get things going as well. So I can't thank you enough. And you talked something at the end as well about integrity, intelligence, and energy. You might have the passion, you might have the energy, you might have the intelligence, but if you haven't got the integrity or ethics, and that's it, that's the end of you. So yeah. Paul, what do you think about that percentage there, Paul?
No, I think that's great. Obviously, I want to pass on my knowledge and help the industry, because that's what it's about. So I really got to thank all the participants, and for those, sorry, it went on a bit longer than maybe you were. Thank you for giving up your Saturday, and amazing to you as well, Anil, for all the time and effort you put into these presentations, and thanks for having me there. And yeah, anybody of your participants, maybe you want me to do a presentation for your company, you know, I'm happy on the same topic. You know, it's this stuff we've got here. I'm obviously it belongs to me, so I'm not going to be sharing the slide presentation in paper copies or to whatever, but if somebody needs that presentation given to another group of people or to another company, I'm sure Anil won't mind me sharing this presentation with and giving it over again to whoever can benefit from it, because that's what it's all about. It's about sharing and people benefiting from this. So we had, I think, 85, 86 participants, but if we can multiply that by 10, well, that's great.
Yeah, no, look, we had 91 participants attending today. Just to finish off, Paul, you know what? I've been working, I'm a full-time project manager. And this morning I was absolutely knackered, and I thought, you know what, how I'm going to do this webinar. But, you know, people like yourself motivate us all to really get going. And doing this now, I'm re-energized, and you being a role model, to give back so much of your time after having been in the construction industry for 35 years. You're still there, 4 hours gap, and we are in for 2 hours and 30 minutes giving your wisdom. So can we have a final big round of applause, everyone, to Paul for giving back all her time and for being here with us from Perth to Mauritius, as I said, and it's already 2 hours and 30 minutes of webinar already, and that's going to be a CPD hours for you as well for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Paul, thank you very much indeed. Like I said, I was absolutely knackered to start the webinar this morning, but you know, for some reason, once you started, it was all worth it. So this is what it's all about, having people like yourself, role model, you know, people who can give us wisdom to really mentor young people as well. So guys, thank you very much indeed. I do apologize to obviously get to 2 hours and 7 minutes, but I wanted Paul to cover all his 72 slides today. Paul, thank you very much indeed. And Paul, are you looking to give us another giving back webinar soon, maybe on a topic that you're passionate about?
Well, it's always welcome. As I touched on, there are a lot of points. We can have a whole webinar on some of the points that we've discussed on project risks and passing risks down. Maybe that's not going to be a 2 hour. Unfortunately, these webinars grow. As I start putting them together, the hour grows to an hour and a half and then 2 hours, because there's always so much to talk about. But yeah, you pick a topic or I'll send you a topic. I think I suggested this one to you. So,
all right. Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you very much indeed, Paul, from Mauritius and from around the world. Thank you to you where you are down under in Perth. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you. Have a great ethical weekend, everyone. And once again, Paul, thanks a million for all your wisdom, knowledge, and to really enhance standard in our industry. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Take care. Paul, once again, thank you. We'll send you all the feedback by email, and also please email your own feedback. Thank you. Paul, take care. I don't want to go, but it's time to go. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.